Today, Darren Waller officially arrived in New York and joined the Giants after being traded from the Las Vegas Raiders yesterday to the New York Giants for a third-round pick, which is actually pick number 100 that the Giants received in that Kadarius Toney trade that happened during the middle of last season with the Kansas City Chiefs. With this trade happening for the Las Vegas Raiders and the New York Giants, I love it for the Giants, and I totally understand it for the Raiders. I feel like right now the Raiders, a lot of people are saying they got fleeced. They made the wrong move. But why would they get rid of Darren Waller? He's a top 5 tight end when he's healthy. There's a lot of reasons why that they got rid of him, and a lot of reasons how this could actually help the Raiders. But before we get into that and how it was a smart move by the Raiders, I want to talk about how this is a great move for the New York Giants. First off, they didn't give up much. They gave up a third-round pick. A third-round pick is not very much considering you're getting a top 5 tight end in the league, top 3 tight end in the league when he's healthy in Darren Waller. Darren Waller is a phenomenal receiving tight end, one of the best in the league. Last season alone, he only played in 8 games, and he had 9 plays that were recorded for 20 yards or more. That would rank second on the New York Giants, only behind Darius Slayton last season, who had 12 plays of 20 yards or more. And keep in mind, Darius Slayton played 16 games. Darren Waller played 9. So if the averages are right, the numbers are right, Darren Waller would have had more plays that were more than 20 yards or more than Darius Slayton if he was able to play a whole season. So I like this move for the Giants because they were aggressive. They didn't give up much. They got a top receiving tight end in the league. They got Daniel Jones, another key weapon that he can utilize besides Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins. And let's be honest, this receiving core for the Giants on paper isn't all that great. Their best player in the receiving room from a statistical standpoint was Darius Slayton, who, again, was solid, but not somebody you think of to be a number 1 receiving player on your team. He had a 725 yards last season with 2 touchdowns to go with it. The other player that they have that was very special for the 8 games that he played was Isaiah Hodgins, who had 350 yards and a couple touchdowns on the Giants last season. Again, solid players, interesting players, diamonds in the rough. Hodgins undrafted. And then you look at Slayton, who was a 6th-round pick. But those aren't guys you want to have as your number 1 receiving option if you're trying to compete. That's why I like the move of getting Darren Waller. Yes, the injury history is not ideal. Yes, you don't want to have him get hurt the majority of the season. Nobody would want that on any player. Darren Waller, the past 2 seasons, has dealt with his fair share of injuries. But again, they're not giving up much, and they're getting a player who has a lot of upside to be a top receiving player on their team, on the New York Giants. Another thing to go alongside is that the Giants, they love their tight end usage. So Waller will fit in perfectly with this team because Daniel Jones loves targeting his tight ends. Last season, Daniel Bellinger was targeted the most among all Giants in the red zone, 7 times, which ranked first among all Giant players on the team. Furthermore, he had 2 touchdowns in the red zone. So, again, they like throwing to their tight ends. I think Bellinger is a very talented player, but Darren Waller, again, he walks in top tight end in the league. So I really like that move because he addresses the receiving depth, but he also is a player that the Giants will utilize a lot because they love their tight ends. Now let's look over to the Raiders side of things. A lot of people were disrespecting the Raiders, saying that this was a bad move. Darren Waller, he's a top 5 player. Yes, he is. He's a top 5 player when healthy. And unlike the Giants, they don't need him. They don't need him to only play 8 or 9 games. They want him to play more, right? They want him to play more games. But if he's only playing 8 or 9 games, they don't want to pay that salary because they don't need him to be they don't need a receiving tight end. They don't need another receiving threat on their unit because they have Davante Adams and they have Hunter Renfrow. They just signed Jakobi Meyers. So the idea of paying a pretty penny to get 8 or 9 games out of Darren Waller for the Giants is good because they need receivers. They need someone that can catch the ball. So they're willing to pay about $17 million a year if they can still, just to get that 8 or 9 game production. The Raiders, on the other hand, they're saying we don't need to pay $17 million a year to get 8 or 9 games from Darren Waller because we don't need him. We don't necessarily need his role because we have Davante Adams. Again, we had Hunter Renfrow last season. They had Matt Collins to do the deep threats. So it wasn't like the pay for the amount of games wasn't worth it to them. Or the Giants, where they're a team that they're desperate for receiving help, it makes sense for them. Now, again, looking over the Raiders, if you're fortunate enough to keep a player like Darren Waller around, you want to, but when the salaries don't work out, when the games don't work, it makes sense to move on from him. Again, they bring in Jakobi Meyers to help kind of make up for that receiving. And yes, it is a lot different when you have 2 wide receivers on the field and a tight end rather than 3 receivers on the field and a tight end. The packages change, and I understand that. So you can't really just say, like, hey, you're replacing the production of Waller with Meyers because of the schemes they have. But again, Meyers still brings in a lot of production and allow for him to rotate in and out, and maybe also provide a scheme that Josh McDaniels more likes, which could be a 3 wide receiver set, then 2 wide receivers and a tight end who can receive. Furthermore, getting rid of Darren Waller allows for them to bring in a player who is maybe a cheaper contract at the tight end position, like Foster Moreau, who they have on their roster. Someone that can be more of a blocking threat, where, again, Foster Moreau comes in, he can be that blocking threat, where Darren Waller wasn't a blocking type of tight end. He was a receiving tight end. So it makes sense for the Raiders to make this move because they cut the salary. They don't have to pay Darren Waller. Darren Waller has a 3-year extension coming up after the season, so he'll be past the age of 30, making $17 million a year as a receiving tight end who has injury history. So it makes sense for the Raiders to make this move. Again, they can bring in somebody like Jakobi Meyers to make up for some of the production. And also from a tight end standpoint, they have Foster Moreau, who can then block it and make more holes and make more holes for Josh Jacobs to run through and for the running backs to run through, and also just to protect Jimmy Garoppolo rather than have to scheme up their tight end to not be able to stay close to the offensive line and not be able to block and actually try and get another player open when that's not necessarily their main concern. Their main concern is keeping Jimmy Garoppolo hurt because they have production from other positions. And then you look over to the Giants and you say, yes, Isaiah Hodgins, he's a diamond in the rough, playing really well. You look at Darius Slayton, he's a diamond in the rough. He played really well. Who knows if he's coming back as well. You have Sterling Shepard, who's good. I'm a big Shepard fan. I'm a huge Sterling Shepard fan. But again, coming off an injury, who knows how his production will do. So it makes sense bringing in Darren Waller and saying, you know what, we're willing to pay this premium price for you because when you are healthy, you are a heck of a player. And let's say, there is 1 out of the 4 seasons where you only play 8 or 9 games. That's okay because we're still getting great production from you for those 8 or 9 games that we really need that production. And then the rest of the years, you're healthy, you're playing games. So it makes sense for both sides. Giants, they get a player who can make plays, who can be a receiver for them and another weapon for Daniel Jones. And then you look to the Raiders, they save some money. They still bring in somebody who can have production in Jakobi Meyers. And now instead of being only receiving, we need players that get open, throw the ball fast. They're saying we have Devontae Adams, we have Matt Collins, we have Renfro, we have Myers. We can allow for their routes to develop because now we have somebody who can block a little bit better than Darren Waller and come in with Foster Moreau and be able to be a great blocker and allow for more time for Jimmy Garoppolo. So all in all, great move by the Giants, understandable move by the Raiders. At the end of the day, Darren Waller is a great player. And, for him to go from the Raiders to the Giants, I'm excited to see how it might shift off both of these offenses.